All right, 1 Samuel chapter 22, beginning in verse 1. David departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. He and Jonathan had been together in a field talking about how his father Saul, Jonathan's father Saul, was wanting to kill David. And so David's escaping from there, and now he comes to the cave of Adullam. And I have furnished you some maps. I think it's on page 1, 2, 3, third page of your handout, and there's 3 maps there. The thing that's tough is it's so small. I realize that. I'm limited by space. I can give you all map, but then I can't give you any thoughts to go along with it. So I highlighted the words of the lesson more than the pictures of the lesson. But if you can get glasses or microscope or something out and begin to look at those maps, you'll find Adullam, you'll find different places that are going to be mentioned geographically, and so those are there for whatever good they do for you. So he's at the cave of Adullam, and his brothers and his father's household heard of it, and they went down there to him. Everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, everyone who was discontented gathered to him. Last week I think I called this the land of misfit toys, like the cartoon of Rudolph. And they go to this island of misfit toys, and they just didn't fit in. And so David's got this grouping of people that are very unhappy. They are in distress, hardship of some kind, anguish, oppression. They're in debt and maybe don't have any avenue to take care of that any other way. Maybe they've lost land and can't support themselves anymore and are maybe in danger because of their debt in some other way. They're discontented, which is another word for bitterness. These are the people who come to him. 400 of them come to him at the end of verse 2. We see that grow later to 600, and we also understand this. They have wives and children. So this is quite a group of people. I've passed road signs in Arkansas with little towns that are less than that. And so he has these 400. If you add women and you add children to that, you see it growing to 600. This is quite a grouping of people that come to him at this cave. Then verse 3, David went from there to Mizpah of Moab. Now that's kind of where we left off last week, so we're picking up new territory here. David went from there to Mizpah of Moab, and he said to the king of Moab, "Please let my father and my mother come and stay with you until I know what God will do for me." Then he left them with the king of Moab, and they stayed with him all the time that David was in the stronghold. Where's the stronghold? We've talked about verse 1, cave of Adullam. Now you see the reference to David's stronghold. So there's a connection between the cave of Adullam and the stronghold of David. Just remember that. That's going to come in handy later in our study because the stronghold is mentioned. And there is some different thoughts about where the stronghold is. But the connection we have biblically at the first announcement of the stronghold is connected to the cave of Adullam. David left there, went to Moab to deliver his parents to the king there, and he's going back where he came from. So the stronghold would be connected to this particular cave of Adullam. The prophet Gad said to David, verse 5, "Do not stay in the stronghold. Depart and go into the land of Judah." So David departed and went into the forest of Hereth. And again, you'll find references to that on the various maps that I've given you if your eyes are good enough to see that. Here's the question we left with last week. Of all the places that David could take his parents, he wants to be sure they're safe. When he goes there to escape King Saul, his brothers, his family hear about it, and they gather to him at the cave, but David doesn't want his parents in the cave of Adullam, hiding out from the forces of King Saul. He wants them out of the line of fire. He wants them in a safe place. Why, of all places, would he go to Moab? First, where's Moab? Geographically, give me some idea where Moab's located. Southeast of Jerusalem. It's southeast enough you'd get wet in the Dead Sea going there. It's across the Dead Sea. So if you go southeast on the other side of the Dead Sea, you're going to be in the area of Moab. So that's where it's at. He's going some 50 miles that direction. If you could just go across a bridge, it'd be like 50 miles straight, as we say, the crow flies. But he's taking his parents over to Moab. Now, I want to digress from our text, and I want to go somewhere else that you're familiar with. But all of this ties together, and I think this is so wonderful when you spot things like this. And if you haven't, I want to be sure that you do. So let's go to the book of Ruth. Joshua judges Ruth. Let's go to the book of Ruth. We're in Ruth, first chapter, beginning in the first verse. Now, it came about in the days when the judges were going back that far, back into the days of the judges. When the days of the judges, when they were governing there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the land of Moab. Where'd he go? Land of Moab, with his wife and his 2 sons. Why? There's a famine around Bethlehem. Nothing to eat, nothing to do. You're going to die there, or at least struggle greatly. So he takes his family, packs them up. They have 2 boys, and they go into the land of Moab. The name of the man was Elimelech, the name of his wife Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem in Judah. Now they entered the land of Moab and remained there. Then Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died. She was left with her 2 sons. They took for themselves Moabite women as wives. The name of the one was Orpah, the name of the other Ruth, and they lived there about 10 years. Now, you're going to have, after the famine, Ruth comes back. I don't want to get ahead of myself here. I want to be sure this all makes sense. Naomi's 2 boys marry the 2 Moabite women. Ruth is one of those. Both of her boys die. That leaves her daughters-in-law, is that the way to say that? Widows. Orpah's going to stay back at Moab, probably get married again. But Ruth wants to go with her mother-in-law, Naomi. Famine's over. She's going back to Bethlehem. And Ruth is going to go with her. And when they get there, they're going to have a distant relative, a much older man than Ruth, and he's going to marry Ruth. So we go up to chapter 4, please. Ruth chapter 4, verse 13. So Boaz took Ruth. Where'd she come from? Moab. She's a Moabite. Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed is the Lord, who's not left you without a redeemer today, and may his name become famous in Israel. May he also be to you a restorer of life and a sustainer of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." Then Naomi took the child, laid him in her lap, and became his nurse. The neighbor women gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." So they named him Obed. Boaz marries Ruth, the Moabite woman. They have a son. His name is Obed. He's the father of Jesse, the father of David. David's distant relatives are in Moab. Why does he take his parents to Moab? those are distant relatives to David. He's the great-grandson of Ruth. And so there is a connection there. Now, another connection. Who are the people of Moab? Where do they come from? All right, let's go back to Genesis chapter 19. Genesis chapter 19, verse 36. Thus both the daughters of Lot were with child by their father. Remember that scene? Sodom and Gomorrah destroyed. And the angels tell Lot and his family to get out of there before the destruction comes. They end up in the hills somewhere, hiding out, while Sodom and Gomorrah and that area is destroyed by the Lord. And the daughters of Lot assume this is the end of civilization as we know it. There may not be another man alive on the face of the earth. They think this may be just a worldwide destruction kind of thing, sort of like the days of Noah. And so they say, we need to give birth to children to keep the human race going. And so they get their father drunk, one after the other, and seduce their father when he's drunk. And this, verse 37, the firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab. He's the father of the Moabites to this day. As for the younger, she bore a son and called his name Ben-Ammi. He's the father of Ammon to this day. Ammonites, Moabites, descendants of Lot through incest, distant relatives of David. He takes his parents over there because there's some connection, at least in distant ways, and he feels that they're safer over there with the king of Moab. Isn't it interesting to see that story just sort of playing out from the book of Genesis? And now we're in the time of David, and you see how all these connections form and why he would take his parents there of all places for refuge. Then we come to this word stronghold. Remember, we've heard it tied to the cave of Adullam. Different people, if you have commentaries at home and you're reading commentaries, they might suggest, well, the stronghold is here, the stronghold is there. If you look at that larger map on page 3 that I've given you, down at the lower portion of that, you're going to find on that map, squint, and you look on the west side of the Dead Sea, and you're going to see that on that map, they think the stronghold is right there close to the Dead Sea. But the cave of Adullam is much further to the north and to the west. So they're suggesting it's a different stronghold. Other people think it's some other place. But the only place that we've heard it connected to is the cave of Adullam biblically. And then later in time, we're going to hear this in 1 Chronicles chapter 11, verses 15 and 16. Now 3 of the 30 chief men went down to the rock of David into the cave of Adullam, while the army of the Philistines was camping in the valley of Rephaim. David was then in the stronghold, while the garrison of the Philistines was in Bethlehem. There again you have the cave of Adullam and the word stronghold connected together. I'm suggesting that the best guess I can make of the stronghold is in the cave of Adullam. And we have that placement on the map, and it's different than the stronghold suggested on that larger top map on your handout. I just thought I'd mention that. Keep a keen eye when you look at the works of men, whether it's maps or comments or commentary. locations of things, just keep a keen eye out for that. A lot of times people are guessing about some things. So be careful of taking that as fact and realize that, some of these have to have a question mark by them. But in our Bible, the only time we see the stronghold of David connected to any particular geographic location is the Cave of Adullam. And so I recommend that we think that direction. Now, David is going to follow the advice of the prophet Gad in verse 5. And he tells him, get out of the stronghold and go into the land of Judah. So David departed and went into the forest of Hereth. So that would be to the east of the Cave of Adullam. And the idea may simply be this. Get out of hiding in the cave and just get out into the land of Judah itself. Quit hiding out there and just come out and get into the land. We would do the same thing, for example, when we were in the throes of COVID-19. We're all tucked away hiding out in our houses. Where? Well, I live in Owasso. But then I came out and I went into Owasso. And so that's, David's hiding out in the Cave of Adullam, and the prophet may simply be saying, get out of the cave and get into the land itself. And so he's going to do that, and he lands in the forest of Hereth, and I do have a location for that on the map for you to look at. Here's the idea. This puts a blip on the radar of King Saul. All of a sudden, he can find David again. Sort of like if you're trying to hide out, and you've watched these movies, right? One of the first things they do is throw their cell phone out the car window because somebody can track it. Well, this is how Saul is going to track David down. He's coming out in the open where people can see him and send back a report. And so all of a sudden he lights up, and Saul is going to figure out where he's at. Now we're moving on to verses 6 through 10. Do you have comments or questions before we do that? All right, verses 6 through 10. Then Saul heard that David and the men who were with him had been discovered. Now Saul was sitting in Gibeah under the tamarisk tree on the height with his spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing around him. Saul said to his servants who stood around him, hear now, O Benjamites. Now, why does he address the Benjamites? Why does Saul address them? Okay, you all need one extra cup of coffee before you come to Sunday morning Bible class. This is his tribe. He is from the tribe of Benjamin. He is surrounding himself with his own countrymen. They are his greatest supporters. So here he is. And notice this, he doesn't have a palace. The temple's not built. He's out in the open under a tree on top of a hill, and his spear is his scepter. We always see him with it. And so that's his scepter. He's under a tree on a hill, and the tribe of Benjamin, they're the ones surrounding him, and he calls out to them, and he says this in verse 7, will the son of Jesse also give to all of you fields and vineyards? Will he make you... What tribe is David from? What tribe is David from? What tribe is Jesus from? Judah, line of the tribe of Judah. He's a descendant of David. Therefore, David is from the tribe of Judah. So, he's saying to them, is he going to give you fields? Is he going to give Benjamites? Is David going to do that for you? Will he make you all commanders of thousands, commanders of hundreds? For all of you have been conspired. All of you have conspired against me, so that there's no one who discloses to me when my son makes a covenant with the son of Jesse. There's none of you who's sorry for me or discloses to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me to lie in ambush, as it is this day. Then Doeg the Edomite. who was standing by the servants of Saul, said, I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob, to Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub. He inquired of the Lord for him, gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. So Doeg pops his head up, and we'll talk about him in just a minute. So here is the simplicity of Saul's court on a hill under a tree in Gibeah of Benjamin. And he makes an announcement to all of the people of Benjamin surrounding him. And the idea is, I'm one of you. And I'm watching out for you. And I'm helping you to elevate yourselves in the land. I'm giving you advancements and titles and vineyards and lands. And I'm helping you out because I'm one of you. David's not going to do that for you. He's not going to favor you that way. He's from a different tribe. And so that's his argument. And then he says, woe is me, poor me. No one's telling me stuff. Why aren't you guys? Look, we're of the same tribe, family, blood's thicker than water. How come none of you are telling me when my son Jonathan, saddling up next to David, making covenants with him, and siding with, no one's telling me anything about it. And you're letting him make an ambush against me. How come no one's telling me anything? And that's when Doeg is going to speak up, and he's going to tell the information that he knows about David. So Saul does make a false statement about David. What does he say David's doing? And is it true? Is David making an ambush against Saul? Is that what David's doing? No. He's hiding out. He's running from Saul. He's trying to get away. And we're going to see him later doing everything he can do to spare the life of Saul because he reveres the Lord's anointed. He won't kill him, even when he has opportunity. David's not trying to ambush Saul. He's just running to get away from him. So Saul's believing his own story. Sometimes we tell ourselves stories that I'm right, everybody else is wrong, here's what they're thinking, here's what they're doing, here's what they're planning, it's all against me. This guilt has created a paranoia. And now Saul's believing his own story, and he's accusing David of lying in ambush against him. And so now Doeg, the Edomite, a descendant from Esau. Doeg the Edomite pops up, and we saw him back a chapter ago when David went to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest, to look for food and a weapon. Doeg was there. He was there when David went to Ahimelech the priest. And he's eavesdropping, and he's watching, and he's seeing what's going on. And so he left from there. Now comes this golden opportunity. Saul's upset. Why is no one telling me anything about David and where he's at and where I can get to him? And Doeg says, I know where he's at. I saw him. And so he's ingratiating himself here with Saul, and he tells him, yeah, I saw him with Ahimelech the priest at Nob, city of Nob. He was over there. And the priest listened to him, and he helped him, and he inquired of the Lord for him, and gave him the Lord's advice, and he gave him food, and he gave him the weapon, the sword of Goliath. I saw all of it. And so Saul is now going to summon Ahimelech the priest and all his father's household to come to Gibeah, and they're going to be questioned. Now that's verses 11 through 13. Let's go ahead and read that. Chapter 22, verse 11. Then the king sent someone to summon Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's household, the priests who were in Nob, and all of them came to the king. Saul said, listen now, son of Ahitub. And he answered, here I am, Lord. Saul then said to him, Why have you and the son of Jesse conspired against me, in that you have given him bread and a sword, and have inquired of God for him, so that he would rise up against me by lying in ambush, as it is this day? Why did you do it? Why are you conspiring against me? And he accuses him that way. And there's that idea of ambush again. So we come to this now, verse 14 and following. Then Ahimelech answered, "Who among all your servants is as faithful as David? Even the king's son-in-law, who's captain over all your guard, and is honored in your house. Did I just begin to inquire of God for him today? Did I do something out of the norm? Did I start something new or different? This is what I've been doing all along. You've made him captain over your guard. You've honored him in your house. You made him your son-in-law. And I've always inquired of the Lord for David. You never said anything before." This is the scenario as Ahimelech knows it. This is the way it's been. Remember, Saul's been playing this cat and mouse game with David, and he has not been upfront with everybody about how much he hates David, and only recently has it come out that he said, "Go kill him." And those in the outlying areas wouldn't necessarily know anything about that. All they know is what's on their ancient TV. All they know is what's being portrayed in the news. And all the news channel of that ancient day knows about, he's the king's son-in-law. The king has admired him enough to make him captain of the army. He's honored him in his own house. And as far as inquiring of God, that's just been something that's always been done, because David's always been the servant of Saul. So this is the plea of Ahimelech. And he tells him in the end of verse 15, "Far be it from me, do not let the king impute anything to his servant or to any of the household of my father, for your servant knows nothing at all of this whole affair." But the king said, "You shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's household." King Saul is nuts. This is just crazy. And the king said to the guards who were attending him, "Turn around and put the priests of the Lord to death, because their hand also was with David, and because they knew that he was fleeing and did not reveal it to me." But the servants of the king were not willing to put forth their hands to attack the priests of the Lord. Here comes Doeg. Then the king said to Doeg, Doeg is an Edomite, not an Israelite. He doesn't have the same scruples that they do. "You turn around and attack the priests." And Doeg the Edomite turned around and attacked the priests, and he killed that day 85 men who wore the linen ephod. And he struck Nob, the city of the priests, with the edge of the sword, both men and women, children and infants, also oxen, donkeys, and sheep. He struck with the edge of the sword. That is an amazing outcome. So you have Ahimelech. He is the son of, find it in the passage, the son of who? What's his father's name? Ahimelech, son of Ahitub. Okay, so that's his father. You'll find it in verse 9. You'll find it in verse 11. Now, backtrack with me a little bit. Back to 1 Samuel 14, verse 3. "And Ahijah, the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eli." The priest of the Lord at Shiloh was wearing an ephod, and the people did not know that Jonathan had gone. Now that's the text in 1 Corinthians 14, and we have a family lineage that stems from Eli the priest. So you have Eli, his son Phinehas, his son Ahitub, his son Ahijah, which may be another spelling of Ahimelech. So it connects through Eli, his son Phinehas, Ahitub, his son Ahijah or Ahimelech. This is where Ahimelech the priest comes from. Now I want you to go back to 1 Samuel 2. Do you remember the wickedness of the house of Eli? Do you remember what his sons were like? Remember how Eli didn't stop them from their sins among the people of Israel? And do you remember what God said to Eli? We're back in 1 Samuel chapter 2, beginning in verse 31. Behold, the days are coming when I will break your strength and the strength of your father's house, so that there will not be an old man in your house. You will see the distress of my dwelling, in spite of all the good that I do for Israel, and an old man will not be in your house forever. Yet I will not cut off every man of yours from my altar, so that your eyes will fail from weeping and your soul grieve, and all the increase of your house will die in the prime of life. What I'm suggesting is this, that when you come to the slaying of all these priests in the city of Nob, 85, they are all of the household of Eli, and that all connects back to this prophecy in 1 Samuel chapter 2, and this is how it's being fulfilled. That prophecy is still in work. It's still happening. And so this is all connecting together. And the amazing thing to me is God made that prophetic utterance to Eli back in the early chapters of 1 Samuel. Now you're seeing it still playing out here when we get to chapter 21 and 22, and these 85 priests being killed. How? Through crazy Saul, who's disobedient to God at this point in his life, but yet is also being used to fulfill a prophecy. It is amazing to see how God balances everything. He allows free will. He lets people choose to do what they want to do, but God providentially can use all these pieces and parts in the free will of humankind and fulfill His purpose. And that balance is absolutely amazing. A mark of inspiration is when we see all of these little details coming together in Scripture, and they just dovetail like fine furniture. And it makes such sense. From David taking his parents to the king of Moab, to the slaying of the priests in the city of Nob, all of that has connections that have to make sense all the way through the biblical narrative and prove to be true. And that's exactly what we're seeing. Now we get to verses 20 through 23. But one son of Ahimelech, of all these priests who are killed in the city of Nob, one son of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. Remember when the prophecy to Eli was, I won't extinguish everybody from your line, but you're going to have all this death and catastrophe down through the ages. And now you have this one who escapes, and his name is Abiathar. He escaped and he fled to David. Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. So we're being given the summary of that in verses 20 and 21, but we see when this particular Abiathar, when he actually catches up to David in the next chapter. So here's the summary of it. He flees to David and he tells him what happens to the priests at Nob. But we don't see him actually catch up with David till we get to the next chapter. So we're going to have more details unfolding about that. Verse 22, Then David said to Abiathar, I knew on that day when Doeg the Edomite was there that he would surely tell Saul, I brought about the death of every person in your father's household. Remember when we talked about that when David was with the priest, Ahimelech? When he was with the priest and he was lying to him about why he was there. Oh, I got all my men with me, but I got them hiding out over here. And the king sent me on such an urgent mission, I didn't even have time to get food or a weapon. You have anything here? By the way, I need to backtrack something with that. We talked about the table of showbread. How big were the loaves? They were bigger than I thought they were. That stuck in my mind. I think it was 2 ephahs of flour per loaf. That's quite a bit. They were pretty big loaves. So, in any case, he gives him 5 loaves of bread from the table of showbread, from the bread of the presence, and the sword of Goliath, but he's lying to him about why he's there. And so, he doesn't know all of this. And we mentioned then that when we practice deceit with one another, that we are removing the ability of the other person to make an informed decision. We're not giving them the facts so that they can decide for themselves, is this something they should do or shouldn't do? Is this right? Is this wrong? Should I be wiser? We're removing the facts from the table, and we're supplying them with faulty information, deceptive information. That's not kind. In the New Testament, we read about each one needs to speak truth with his neighbor. There's a reason for that. So the priest made an uninformed decision to help David, and it caught up to him when Saul caught up to him. And now you have David who sees Doeg the Edomite at Nob when he's talking to the priest. He knows who he is. He knows he's loyal to Saul, and he tells the escapee, Abiathar, I knew it, I knew it, I knew it. I saw Doeg there. When I was there, I knew he was going to tell Saul, Abiathar, this killing of your family, it's my fault. I knew it when I saw him. Interesting, isn't it? David's lies and deceit caught up with him. Doeg had evil intentions when he ratted him out to King Saul. But Doeg did tell the truth of what he saw. David did not tell the truth when he was in front of the priest. So he tells Abiathar now, verse 23, Stay with me, do not be afraid, for he who seeks my life seeks your life. You're safe with me. So he flees to David. He's going to reach him in the next chapter. We'll read more about that then. And Abiathar, there's a Paul Harvey here. The rest of the story. Abiathar is going to be faithful to David, and he's going to serve as priest to David until David's old. And when David's older and his son Adonijah rises up against his own father David, Abiathar switches sides and he goes to support Adonijah. Then, 1 Kings 1:7, he, Adonijah, had conferred with Joab, the son of Zeruiah, and with Abiathar the priest, and following Adonijah, they helped him. And then David dies, Solomon takes over, and the first thing he does is he removes Abiathar from the priesthood. And here's what Solomon tells Abiathar. This is 1 Kings 2, verses 26 and 27. Then to Abiathar the priest, the king said, Go to Anathoth to your own field, for you deserve to die. But I will not put you to death at this time, because you carried the ark of the Lord God before my father David, because you were afflicted in everything with which my father was afflicted. So Solomon dismissed Abiathar. This is because he left David and helped support his rebellious son Adonijah. Solomon is taking care of this now. His father's dead, and Solomon tells him, you go get to Anathoth. You're removed from the priesthood. And then verse 27, we read this. So Solomon dismissed Abiathar from being priest to the Lord in order to fulfill the word of the Lord which he had spoken concerning the house of Eli in Shiloh. All that history connects all the way back to that prophecy to Eli back in chapter 2. And this is providentially how God fulfilled all of that. All I want to end with is this. Do we have to wonder if every word of God will be established? Do we have to wonder if every word of God will come to pass? We do not have to wonder. He has that track record. He's recorded it all through the history of the Bible. So when Revelation 20 tells us, I saw the dead, the great, the small, standing before the throne, and the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life, and the dead were judged from the things which were written in the books according to their deeds. That's going to take place. Every particle of the Word of God will come to pass. All of it. God will providentially work through the history of mankind. We'll all make whatever choice we want to make, and God will use it to fulfill His ultimate will. And in the end, the books will be open. We will stand there and be judged according to what we have done. So the time to obey God and receive His forgiveness is right here, right now. Get on God's side and act in faithful ways, because the Word of God is established, and it will occur just as He said it would. And He will bring justice to His people. You watch stuff like this take, and this is just one example, this history we've just read. You watch this take place all the way through the Bible and how it all weaves together, and you see God's hand in these things while people choose to do whatever they want to do. Just an amazing account.